Hello and welcome to Arts and Entertainment
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris
I'm Randall.
and welcome to the show. Uh, I'm going to just get this quickly out of the way because I actually sometimes forget. But if you are returning to the show, you've been a big fan, but you have not liked or subscribed, hey, it's time to like and subscribe. If you've never watched this show before, hey, it's time to subscribe. Always comment. I have a feeling this is a show that should generate a lot of comments. Share this with your friends and loved ones. Share this with your enemies. Hey, Randall, what's a good way for people to get in touch with us?
Just check our website first, chrisandrandall.com. You can see how to get subscribe to our podcast. There's different services. You can use just about any service for our podcast. Go to our Facebook page for leaving comments. That's usually a good place to leave them. You can email us. Just go to our site and check it out, chrisandrandall.com.
It's a wonderful site. And again, commenting on Facebook. I'm always checking on Facebook. We look so good on YouTube. But you might just be listening to us. So, for those of you who are listening to us, I'll get to that in a second. So I want to let you know, the date of the recording of this show is January 27th. The airing of the show originally was January 28th, 2021. And therefore, this episode is going to get really dated really fast. But hopefully, we'll find a way of making what we have to say kind of significant beyond the day or the fad, the trend, the time. A week ago today, when we recorded this, history was made. America elected its second Catholic president. America elected its first female vice president, its first African-American vice president, its first East Asian vice president. There were all these different things. Do you remember there was a poet, the youngest poet laureate ever? There were many different colored coats on. Big day in history, lots of visual signifiers. It was very well produced, very well put together. Now that morning, a 79-year-old Jewish man representing the state of Vermont put on his Parker, grabbed the manila envelope because he had to mail something, may or may not have brushed his hair, sat on a bench by himself to watch history, having no idea that he would be the great takeaway from that moment in time. I am now talking about the famous Bernie Mittens meme.
It's a major event. There's all sorts of, high up muckety mucks from the U.S. government there, former presidents. Everybody's dressed to impress. Michelle Obama, she wore like an amazing outfit. Everybody's like talking about how beautiful it was. What does Bernie do?
Lady Gaga and J-Lo were there, not two slouches. Singing and wearing crazy performer clothing.
Lady Gaga's dress had like a train that was 6 or 7 feet trailing behind her. It was ridiculous.
And some sort of bird out of the Hunger Games. And, Garth Brooks, Great American, came up with his cowboy hat. There was lots. The White House, the Capitol steps, had only 2 weeks earlier been the scene of a violent insurrection. There were masks because we're living in a pandemic. There was so much iconic imagery. There was so much going on. And yet one man, Brendan Simialski, a former sports journalist who is a wire service photographer for Agence France Presse, he took this picture. So I want to give some folks a little bit of what we're going to do today, because this is going to be a very strange show. There's a few different things we're going to unpack today. We're calling this Unpacking the Bernie Mittens meme phenomena, the art of the Bernie meme, the entertainment of the Bernie meme. So, Randall, let's look at this separately. I want to look at just the actual photograph and talk about the art of photojournalism, which I know you have some very strong opinions about, as it relates to the historical impact of this as an actual photograph that you would see in the newspapers and the media. Then I want to separate that from the meme, the social media element, which is its own phenomena, it's its own thing, and is actually operating in almost the opposite way. And then in between, we're going to look at a brief history of American the world political iconography, how images of people politically have impacted our society. And then we'll also look at political memes on social media over the last 2 decades to get a sense of where things are. And then we will look at the big phenomena. If you're listening and you're not watching, behind Randall and myself are a lovely sample of many of the Bernie memes. And if you are watching us, I have just wasted your time.
Well, can we talk about what Bernie was wearing? So he was wearing.
I want to get into it in a sec. I just want to let me just set up this and then go into what he was wearing.
Okay, yeah. So Bernie, we already talked about. There's all these muckety mucks, high up people wearing all these really nice clothes, but Bernie, he's wearing like you've told me it's like a $500 jacket, which is pretty normal for the cold over there, and some unassuming clothing, brown jacket.
He's wearing what I would call, because I lived in the Midwest for 5 years, if you live in a place where it gets 20 to 30 below, it's a practical coat. Okay,
it's a practical coat. And he doesn't do his hair. Like Trump is famous for spending an hour on his hair every day. Bernie, he's got normal hair going on. He probably just rolled out of bed. I don't know. I don't know what his hair regime is like.
I think what you're doing here, and I want to stop you just for a sec, because this is good stuff, is I want to talk about how this relates as photojournalism and how what you just said is part of photojournalism. If you'll grant me this,
right? But I was about to just talk about his mittens and be done. So
okay, go ahead.
So the capper to his whole outfit was a pair of mittens that were homemade by a woman named Jen Ellis. She mailed them to Bernie. I guess she was a Bernie supporter. She mailed him some mittens, and they're just homemade mittens. I mean, he's wearing a completely unassuming outfit. He's not putting on any airs. He's very humble.
Yeah,
at least in the way he looks, and he looks very relaxed. And I mean, people have interpreted the way he looks to mean different things.
What you're doing here is really interesting because let's get to what this first section is about. Now that you've set it up, there's a really good quote on photojournalism, which is the main objective of photojournalism is to tell a story better than the next, or to write up that usually accompanies the photo. Therefore, it should capture images that have meaning or relevance to the story being told. The story being told. So I'm going to get to this wonderful interview with the photographer, Brendan Similowski. And he wasn't actually there to take a photo of Bernie. He was there to take a photo of Senators Josh Hawley and Senators Ted Cruz, two Republicans who have gotten into a lot of controversy over their support of Trump. And he says, I saw Sanders out of my other eye, kind of fiddling with his gloves. It was just a nice moment. And when he crossed his legs and crossed his arms, I threw the camera over to him. Now, Simioski says it's not even really one of his good photos. He says, I took 2 pictures. It's funny because the second one, for me, I thought was better. But I sent the first one because the moment, the posture, his pose, is what you're talking about, Randall, is a little better. But the composition was garbage. But he chose the reality over the composition because he feels that the composition comes second to content. And content is the moment. You can make it look pretty after. So content is the moment. What you just described, Randall, is the content. What you've actually really described is Sanders, but what is also, I think, part of it is, as you say, the chair that he's sitting on, the cold weather of the day, the event, the other people near him, right? This really gets to where I think you're going, which is, what is the story that this photo tells?
Well, what's the story do you think the photo tells?
Well, if we just look at photojournalism as telling the story about a moment in history and a moment in time, then what's the moment we're talking about, right? And now I really want to be very clear about something. I'm going to try to avoid politics as much as I can get away with on this episode, because I don't really think this is about politics in either section. I really think when you get to a presidential inauguration, it is quite literally the ceremonial installation of a new leader. So every time America elects or swears in or has the oath of a new president, it's always history. It just is by default. But yes, as I said before, in light of COVID, in light of a hardly fought election and post-election, in light of that 2 weeks prior, there had been a very violent attack on the Capitol right in front of us in that photo, in light of the fact that there were a lot of historic firsts, I think what it should have been was just one more photo of one more person who is in attendance. At best, you could say it's a photo of the man who could have won.
And that's the way some people interpret it.
He could have been right. Yeah. So let's go on with that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people interpret it as Bernie being a sourpuss, looking dejected, looking bitter because he lost, But I think the real story of the photo, personally, I think, and why it's become so popular is because it shows somebody who's completely humble. He's got these homemade gloves on. He's just sitting there like he doesn't care if anybody sees him. He's just trying to. Bernie Sanders has said he's just tried to stay warm. I mean, that's why he's all closed up.
You're not alone on this one, because that's what Siemiaski says too. He said when asked about its popularity, he says Bernie Sanders is very comfortable, is a well-defined image and a brand of politics. I think this photo is a nice moment. I definitely stand by that. It trades on who he is. If this was a picture of anybody else and everything's the same, I don't think it'd be what it is today. So I think what you're saying, a lot of people are right. Naomi Klein wrote an essay in The Intercept, breaking it down into 5 possibilities of why this photo has become so popular. And like you, she really looked at it as a political statement, that this is a photo of either Bernie, the man, or what his movement represents, or the possibility of what his movement expects, the progressives. If you want, you could even say it tells the story of America, right? It's a peaceful transition of power. And Bernie, at the end of if this was a movie, an Aaron Sorkin film, right? It said, look, Bernie took on Joe, but he always called Joe a friend. And here he is cheering Joe on with no bitterness or animosity. Because, at the end of the movie, even if Gary Cooper gets was it Philadelphia Story, where even though, whatever, it's the one wherever, any movie where the one guy gets the girl, his best friend is still his best friend. It's that.
Yeah, there's something very American about that. It just occurred to me, when America started, the second place finisher in the presidential race became the vice president. Biden has made a lot of his former opponents into cabinet members. And Bernie Sanders is a former opponent sitting right there. And, for Trump not to go to the inauguration, it's a little bit un-American. I mean, and Bernie just sitting there dejected, but at least he's present. He's participating in government. I mean, there's something very American about it.
Absolutely, because, and you're right, because Mike Pence is there. And, you see George W. Bush hanging out with Barack and Bill. And it's this great American thing. America is not a politically, strangely enough, up until 40 years ago, America was not a politically divisive country. We prided ourselves on the fact that, at the end of the day, we'd all sit down and break bread with each other, all have a drink. And it is that Capra-esque, we're all in it together. We're not like Europe, which has class wars. We're not elites versus poor.
We're not supposed to have classes.
Right. We're a classless. And Joe Biden, certainly that's his ethos. I'm everyday Joe. And Bernie Epton said, my good friend Joe, So as I said, there's something very cinematic and cute and endearing, right? And it also is kind of interesting visually because it lets, I saw it, but I'm living in Southern California So I'm watching it, you're watching it, and it was like 80 degrees that day here. So, when you look at him, you realize, oh my God, it's cold. It's cold, right? Like, because I don't know where he's sitting in the cheap seats, first off. They're sitting in the box seats. There's probably heaters. They're wearing elegant coats. They have beautifully coiffed hair. I'm talking about the gentlemen now. The ladies have got everybody. It's so aristocratic. And here is Bernie. And I think the first things you think about when you see Bernie is, oh my God, he's someplace cold. And not only is he someplace cold, but I'm from New York. I've lived in the Midwest. I own quite a few beautiful long overcoats, and I own many different Parkers, all of layering intensity. And just as a fact, my friend from Hawaii, you do need long coats are gorgeous, but they're never going to keep you as warm as a good solid Parker. Also, when you sit down in a long coat, it's not that comfortable. It's a bit awkward. It's just a bit old.
So Chris, so you're saying that Bernie's coat is very practical.
It is exceedingly practical. And now, mind you, it's not cheap, but neither are these coats. So both Bernie and these gentlemen are wearing expensive clothes, but Bernie bought this back when he was campaigning in Iowa in January, where, again, it's -40 below with a wind chill, and he's a 78-year-old man who just survived a heart attack. So he is dressed correctly. And also, if you look at his body position, as you said, he is trying to stay warm, right? He's not looking comfortable. He is looking like a man who, regardless of how good his coat is, isn't good enough. He's cold. And he's got on mittens, which are no one's going to ever call them elegant.
They're not a fashion statement. I mean, you know what? The lady that made these mittens, she did a great job. I mean, obviously, Bernie saw those mittens and said, "These are going to keep my hands warm. I'm putting them on."
As we used
but
to
he's not going to impress any of the muckety mucks, right?
It's what we call lo-fi fashion, right?
Yeah, it's not.
It's like grunge, it's basically dime store chic, right? It says I didn't spend a lot of money on my mittens. He'd spend a ton of money on his coat, but it's and as Smirsky said, it's on brand, right? I mean, there's a very funny Onion article where they said Bernie comes back tanned and polished for his 2020 run for presidency. It's a great Photoshop where he's wearing, he's got tan and a slick haircut and a beautiful suit. It's so against brand, it's hysterical. But he's so on brand. But the thing that I think gets people thinking, and this is really, I think, it's the most humanistic. And if you really look at any of the great photos, right? Like World War II, you remember the sailor kissed the nurse?
Yes.
Or there was an ad with an Indian crying over pollution, just one tear.
the TV commercial in the 70s,
right.
Yeah.
Or the gun being held to the young girl in Vietnam. Like, all of the great photojournalistic photos, I think what really makes them stand out, whether you're looking at Avedon, Karsh, anybody, portraitists. I just read some portraits, so let me take that back. Well, no, if you look at either good portrait photographers or good photojournalists, I think what has put them in museums is there is something so universal and so human, so frail, so vulnerable. I think that all of the other photos from that day, the reason why they didn't gain the same level of popularity is because they're manufactured, right?
Well, they're manufactured not by the photographer, but by the people in the photo. I mean, people are putting on clothes that they're not going to wear every day. They're putting on to impress. They're putting on clothes to impress. They're very aware that they're being watched. They want to look good. I mean, Bernie has none of those qualities in this photo.
Now, Randall, you're a photographer, and you're an excellent photographer. And I have hired you to take photographs of my storytelling shows. I know you've done sketch shows. I've known you've done stand-up. What is the difference between photographing a person when they're posing for you versus when you're doing what they call, I guess, a candid, when you're just catching them in a naked moment where they don't know they're being observed?
Well, you said it. A candid like something that a photojournalist might do is try to take a picture of someone or something that's not aware it's being watched, and you're trying not to disturb it. I mean, the great thing about this Bernie photo is nobody knows. I don't think Bernie knows he's being photographed.
No, he doesn't. I mean, it's a Nikon DSLR with an incredibly long lens. It was actually part of a bigger photo that just kind of narrowed down to him. That's why the composition is for shit. Sorry, folks, I said shit.
Yeah, if you're trying to capture reality.
It's not a deliberate photo. There's nothing about it that has, and even the art photographer said, has no art. It's just a random quick flash moment. So when you're a photographer taking a photo of like an improv team, and they're just making a quick expression within the second, is it that you know what you've got, or you just shoot and then you look and ask questions later?
Yeah, I've taken many photos like that. Yeah, a lot of times you don't know what you're going to get, because when people are moving around in a performance, I mean, the split second photos you get from somebody moving around in a performance are surprising. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, sometimes people will stop, a performer will stop and pose as part of the routine they're doing, as part of the show they're doing, but and that can frequently be good, but yeah, I mean, it's the surprising moments usually that are the best when you're taking photos.
There is a famous photo of the Cuban Missile Crisis with Kennedy at his standing over his desk with his arms clutched against his oak table, and you know that the weight of the world is on his shoulders. I always loved that photo because at no point has Kennedy looked more like a human being with his back turned to us in that position than in that moment, versus, say, the traditional Kennedy photos. He was one of the best looking men to ever be president, so I'm picking on him because all of his formalized portraits look like an actor who was hired to be president.
That's one of the things I like about photography is its ability to capture reality. I mean, like almost no other medium. I mean, it even captures, I mean, like I said about capturing moments that surprise you. You didn't know they existed until you look at the photos. Like this photographer, too. He didn't know that moment existed. He didn't even know that moment existed until it was shared on Twitter, right?
And I think there's a certain beauty in photography in general, especially photojournalism. I have a friend who's a professional photojournalist, and he says to me that he's taught me a lot about it. He says, you know, every photo tells a story. It has a beginning, middle, and an end. And I guess when you really think about it, the context of the person, the relationship to their environment is part of that story. And you're really looking at that's what's informing you when you look at this photo as a proper photo. And I think that's what gives it its resonance, you know. But would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't look at photography as storytelling as much as some other photographers do. I know that's a good way to think of photography when you're actually taking the photos. You're thinking, how do I capture the feeling of this moment, this event? Like I've done event photography, so sometimes you think, how can I take photos that really tell the story? But you know, I think photos, they go beyond storytelling. They're capturing things that because they capture so much detail, they're capturing things that even the photographer doesn't quite understand. I mean, even with this Bernie photo, I mean, this is a good example. I mean, the photographer doesn't know that this photo is so important, is going to be so special.
And that's a good point too, because I think every artist, my mom's a painter, she'll be the first to tell you that you don't know what you've made until you've made it. Until it all comes together.
Well, that's the best kind of art. I mean, I think that you can go into making art where we've talked about this on the show before. You can go into making art thinking, you know, the exact outcome. You know exactly what the outcome's going to be. You know how it's going to affect people. You know what the effect's going to be. But I think it's better to go into art making where you're a little bit more open-ended and you're reaching for something that you don't quite know what it is. Which is why photography is like a very exciting art form, I think, because you don't know what the photo means when you're taking it, and you barely know what it means when you look at it.
Yeah, these are excellent points. The last thing I just want to say on photography is that every photo is different because every photo isn't just about the subject and their environment, but it's also about, and not just the moment, but it's also about the eye of the photographer and what he or she chooses either consciously or subconsciously. And I would argue subconsciously because you're just firing so fast, but then conscious when you realize that's the shot to go with. Uh, and each one is different. Each one is a gift. So I want to move on to political iconography and its various forms because I think it's really important to understand this where we're going. The most common form of political iconography we know is the political cartoon. Literally, you open up any newspaper in America, there is some guy who's or woman whose job it is to do a caricature of whatever is going on in politics that day. And it's weird because it's a bit of it's humor, but it's also satire, it's critique. And the man who was considered the father of the American cartoon was a man named Thomas Nast, who lived between 1840 and 1902. And his contributions are manifold. He's actually the guy who popularized the donkey and the elephant for the Republican and to the Democratic and Republican parties. I got my organization wrong. But the thing that he did while he was writing for Harper's that is, I think, the most important is he did editorial cartoons. And his most famous one was of William Marcy Boss Tweed, the Tammany Hall Democratic Party political leader of New York City. He was a ridiculously corrupt party hack and mayor and politician in New York City. I should have looked up if he was mayor. I assumed he was. Bad historian you. He may not have been, but he was a big man in 1860s New York, and he was corrupt. And he would do all of these cartoons, Nast, much to Tweed's consternation, implicating Tweed and his friends and all their illegal shenanigans. And in doing so, he raised publicity enough so that Tweed was arrested and tried and convicted and died in jail. A cartoon that literally brought down a political leader through a satire. It's incredibly powerful. And he would go on to do this for about 20 years over 6 presidential elections. He was, in fact, called the President Maker. So there we go. That's really, I think, the first documented case, at least in American culture, of a caricature becoming so popular that it topples a man's leadership.
Yeah, Nast's illustrations are amazing. But, I think there are lots of illustrations, comics, cartoons that really have a huge influence on politics and culture, or at least they express the popular mind going back through history. I've always thought, I told you this offline or before the show, Chris, but I think it would be really interesting if somebody made a book of just the history of illustrations and comics. And I mean, it would be fascinating to see, because, when you read about history, and especially like in the olden days when you used to read history books, they weren't filled with cartoons, right? I mean, most history books, you've read history books, right? Because they're like full of dense text. But, there are a lot of very influential cartoonists, cartoons, illustrations all throughout history.
And we will definitely have to do a show on that. But you said something very interesting to me, which I'm going to just ask you to, my memory is not great, but we're historically out of context. It's a few years before Nast, but Napoleon, you're saying, wasn't really short?
I believe, this is research I did a long time ago, but I believe that Napoleon being short is, this idea we have of being short is comes from political cartoons at the time. I think it comes from a certain political cartoonist. I would have to look it up again, but yeah, he was an average height, but he was depicted in illustrations as like insecure, greedy little guy that wanted to take over the world.
And it's interesting because really you could go back to England at the turn of the 19th century with Punch magazine. So you are right. It's something important to really think about is that photography, while it did come into existence in the middle of the 19th century, it didn't become a standard or as popular until really the beginning of the 20th century. So illustration in general was the dominant form of visual interpretation. So many people, the way they saw Abraham Lincoln was through the illustrations of the man with the big hat and the long beard. The same thing with Napoleon. Again, same thing with Tweed. So visual iconography and the ability to distort and in a negative way, really, for the most part, or in a positive way to make them look better looking. This emblematic look. The 19th century is really the last time where it's really the artist's interpretation that has weight over realism. And that is good because I want to jump all the way to 1960 and what is, I think, the beginning of the convergence of art and photography with one of the most iconic political paintings. My apologies. I'm going to do my best to say it first in Spanish. Guerrilla Herico. Did I say that right? It means
I'm not totally sure, but I think it's Guerrero Heroco.
Much better. So that translates into heroic guerrilla fighter. It's an iconic photograph of the Marxist revolutionary Che Guevara. It was taken by Alberto Corta. It was captured on March 5th, 1960 in Havana, Cuba, at a memorial service for the victims of La Cubra Explosion. So, if you know who Che Guevara is, this is literally the first image you have in your mind. If you don't know who Che Guevara is, take a moment, put us on pause, Google him, come back. Okay, so that image you have, Randall, right, of the long beard, the hat, the piercing gaze, this is Corda's photo. And it was taken in 1960. It certainly had a pretty good degree of popularity. But in 1967, an Irish artist who is the son of a man named Jim Fitzpatrick, who is the father of a photojournalist and the grandson of a political cartoonist, Thomas Fitzpatrick, he had met Che 5 years earlier when Che was visiting Ireland. I'm not going to say his last name because I've done such a bad job with Spanish today. But he was a big fan, and he asked Corda if he could take that photograph and do something with it. So what he ended up doing was, his first image I did of Che was psychedelic. It looks like he's in seaweed. His hair was not his hair. It's shapes that I felt gave an extra dimension. That was the image I produced for a magazine, and that was done before he died. And that is an important thing about that image. At first, I did not print it. It was considered far too strong and revolutionary when he was murdered. I decided I wanted to do something about it, so I created a poster. I felt this image had to come out, or he would not be commemorated otherwise. He would go where heroes go, which is usually into anonymity. So he does this to immortalize him. Now, he prints this on one color black and one color red, and he hand-painted the star in yellow. Fitzpatrick wants the image to breathe like rabbits and hand-printed thousands of images to give this away to anyone for free. So I've now covered a little too much. So Randall, you've looked at that image yourself. What do you think of that iconic image of Che?
I kind of remember the first time I saw it. It was like in a T-shirt in a store or something, and
yeah,
it's the first time you see it, I mean, it's striking. I mean, you're immediately struck by it. You wonder, who is this guy? You wonder. He seems very serious. You think that he must be somebody important. He must be a great person. I mean, it's almost religious. It almost looks like kind of a Renaissance painting of Jesus.
Yeah, actually, you're very right. There's something very beatific about it, and because I'm 10 years older than you, I remember the 70s vividly, and everywhere you went, was some variation of this image painted on posters, buttons, T-shirts, the back of a jeans jacket, anywhere and on anything. Now, Fitzpatrick formed a poster company called Two Bare Feet, and he produced a variety of these posters in '67 using the Korda image. Now, thankfully, Korda did not mind. He was like, he didn't want any money. And for that matter, Fitzpatrick didn't want any money. And within a year, it ended up that his poster was shown in the Lisan Gallery in 1968. And it illustrates how the image moved from protest into the realm of fine art. And here's what some of the people have said, since it's been so popular for so long. From the Maryland Institute College of Art called it a picture of art called this picture a symbol of 20th century and the world's most famous photograph. Versions of it have been painted, printed, digitized, embroidered, tattooed, silkscreened, sculpted, or sketched on nearly every surface imaginable, leading the Victoria and Albert Museum to say that the photograph has been reproduced more than any other image in photography. Jonathan Green, director of the UCR California Museum of Photography, has speculated that Korda's image has worked its way into the language around the world. It has become an alphanumeric symbol, a helograph, an instant symbol. It is mysteriously reappears whenever there's a conflict. There isn't anything else in history that serves that way. Now, Randall, I would agree with everything that he just said if you go from May of 1967 to January 19th, 2021.
What happened
Because the next day, Bernie supplants all of this. Sorry.
You think Bernie has supplanted Che, huh?
Oh, after 50 years? No, there's definitely more images of Bernie now than there are of Che. It is everything they just said, the alphanumeric, the helograph. Now, that's not to take anything away from Jim Fitzpatrick, but it is to show you that there's a big difference between, it's 7 years between the time that Korda takes a photograph and Fitzpatrick makes his interpretation. It's another year before it becomes an art installation. And it's decades of reproduction and other social unrest that keep it alive and going. And in fairness, I honestly do believe that, in my opinion, the Che Guevara image that Korda took will long outlive even the Bernie Sanders. But right now, in this point in history, it's not about length of time, it's about spread. But let's get to the Jim Fitzpatrick poster of the 21st century, the Shepard Fairey Hope poster. Why don't you take that story away, Randall?
All right. Well, Shepard Fairey, he's a famous artist. He originally made the Andre the Giant poster, and he posted that around all over the place. Same way that the Che was posted everywhere. While Obama was running, Shepard made the iconic red and blue Obama image that people know about. He took it from an AP photograph. He put words underneath it like progress, hope, and change. The Obama campaign loved it, and they decided they wanted the one with hope on it. And the Obama campaign, I know they entered in some kind of agreement with him, and they started using it to advertise Obama. I mean, almost everybody probably knows about have seen the Obama image, the red and blue image with hope underneath. Too,
because Shepard Fairey, unlike Jim Fitzpatrick, was an established underground artist. We had already seen his Obey art, his Bush caricatures, right? He had a career prior to this.
Fairey was huge. Okay, Fairey was one of the most successful artists in the world when the Obama Hope poster came out. So I mean, it was a great step up for Shepard Fairey's career.
And at that time, people like Banksy were also starting to become more popular. Outsider art, dangerous graffiti art. It added an element of coolness and hipness to the Obama campaign.
Yeah, there's been this movement in the fine arts for a while called street art. And, yeah, Banksy is a big street artist. Yeah, but Shepard Fairey, he was he's maybe not as famous as Banksy, but he's up there, man. And even before the Hope poster, but the Hope poster definitely made him into like he's going to be remembered, as a great artist now for sure.
Laura Barton, writing for The Guardian, wrote something that I think is very telling. She said that the image acquired the kind of instant recognition of Jim Fitzpatrick Che Guevara poster and should surely set to grace T-shirts, coffee mugs, and the walls of student bedrooms in the years to come. And I think that's an interesting distinction, because when I was in college, you could still have a Che Guevara poster in your room. But Che Guevara first resonated, I think, not just with counterculture, but with protesters. And I think it's fair to say that Shepard Fairey certainly always was part of the resistance movement, but the Obama Hope poster landed in college dorms before it became a sign of revolutionary impact. I honestly think that the Obama poster found its home in respectable, middle-class, professional, college student, and liberal homes. That Fairey actually took something that was outsidery and dangerous, and he made it just clean enough for prime time. Or maybe the subject, Obama, made it just clean enough for prime time.
Well, Obama in the image is I think he's wearing a suit. I mean, he doesn't have an angry look on his face. He's like looking off into the distance as if he's like imagining a better world. And with the lack of detail, he looks young. He's a relatively young man in the photograph that it's taken from anyway. The Che Guevara image, I mean, he's wearing that beret. He's got the star on it. I mean, he looks like he could be wearing a military uniform, but it's not.
Che is 31 in that photo. Yeah, and Obama is in his early 40s, which now I realize is a very young age. So you're right. They're both young men with piercing stares who don't realize they may realize they're being photographed, but they're not posing.
Well, the funny thing about the Che photograph is I think he does look older. I mean, it's just, I don't know. He's got more wrinkles on his face. I'm not sure. There's more detail. The more detail in the photo will make you look older. But yeah, I mean, they both look like candids. You're right. They both look like they're not rehearsed. They're real. They're genuine. They're sincere. Yes.
But they also look like leaders. They look like men on a mission. Maybe because Guevara is at a funeral. Maybe because Obama is on the stump. But they both have a sense of the imperative, of thoughtfulness. These are the traditional photos of great men that elevate and make them look mythical, heroic. Really. Because the colors are so surrealistic in their faces. Their faces, really, if you look about it, their faces are made to look not real, not human. Their faces are made to look somehow godlike.
Well,
religious.
They both use the same photographic trick, which is they're shot at a low angle. And also they both have strong key lighting, which gives them like I would say it gives their faces more depth, but it also makes it seem more real. I mean, if they were shot like a more cartoony way, whereas they were the lighting was even, it wouldn't seem as real or as striking. So it's interesting that they both. Yeah, you're right. They both share similar aesthetic qualities.
And it's interesting too, because while they are very real in their gesture and facial expression, the colors that their skin and their background is contrasted against is as far from real as possible. It's psychedelic, it's expressionistic, but it is there's no naturalism in either of them as far as color, shading, or background.
Well, you're right. That's another aesthetic quality they share. I mean, you take out the color detail, and suddenly they seem mythical and godlike.
Yeah.
So the low angle, the high key light.
Mythical and godlike, just like we would look at a painting of God by a Renaissance painter,
Or
or
Jesus.
Jesus, or even the old Greek or Egyptian art, where it was made clear that these beings were otherworldly, not of our own universe. Their backgrounds, their skin is the first telling detail that they're not of us.
You know what? It's
But
funny. It's funny we're talking about this because I'm trying to imagine now trying to get a picture like that of Bernie Sanders. I don't even think
well,
it's possible.
we'll get to that in a moment, because you're cheating. Don't let the audience know it's stop with the spoilery. So I'm going to let's move over to something really quick, which is a brief review of the last 20-ish years, not even really 20, 17 years of political humor on social media. And the first big, I don't even know if you can call these things memes, because I'm an old man, so I'm calling things a meme right now that may not just be a meme. But back in 2004, another Vermont politician, the governor, Howard Dean, was running for president, and he gave a concession speech. And for those of you too young to remember it, it was a lot of shouting. I mean, he was shouting at a crazy man's volume. So someone took the audio, distorted it, and made it kind of sound like a yeehaw sort of punctuating scream. And it was one of the earliest internet memes. And I remember back in 2004, that crazy yeehaw Howard Dean meme was like everywhere. And it made him look like, well, he was already out of the picture. But do you remember that one? He looked like such a fool.
Well, I don't know. You want to get in depth on that moment? I mean, it was played over and over, but there were technical reasons why it was kind of overblown. But yeah, I mean, the media portrayed him as a fool. You know, they like to play it over and over. But I remember watching it. I didn't think it was that crazy. It was just he just let a little scream out.
You got to remember, in 2004, our tech was pretty low. It certainly made it impossible for him to have a comeback. But that same year, a company called JibJab actually really showed a much better version of what you could do in social media, because they used flash animation, and they used cartoon faces of George Bush and John Kerry, who were running against each other for president that year. Kerry had defeated John Dean, singing a parody of This Land Is Your Land that spoofs the 2004 presidential election. Now, the video became a viral hit, viewed over by 100 million people. And from that, JibJab would go on to do other things like Good to Be in DC and Big Box Mart. Now, that was really, now around that same time, you have the Lonely Island, the Chronicles of Narnia rap. But we're just dealing with politics right now. So musical humor as parody in 2004 with flash animation, that was like the coolest thing, wasn't it?
It captured the mainstream press like the Howard Dean scream. I mean, it was on TV. The media loved it. They loved that some cool kids on the internet were like doing something about the politics.
Yeah, but it also had like the big cartoonish heads on small bodies. It was going all over the place. Everybody knows the song "This Land Is Your Land." And they love the idea of parodying it. And it kind of summed up the craziness in a satirical way of what was a very light political year. The 2004 political election campaign was not very dramatic.
Well, I want to put in...
were highly dull. And there wasn't any big issues going on.
True. And I just want to say that's how a lot of elections used to be. I mean, it used to be a joke that, what is it? Oh, God, I can't remember that comic, but it used to be the joke was, who are you going to vote for, the puppet on the left or the puppet on the right? They're both exactly the same. I mean, even The Simpsons would make jokes about that, how political candidates are exactly the same. They were just both similar moderates, but that all
they literally went to college together. They went to college together, right? They were in the same secret society. So the humor of it was very gentle and very silly. And then another one that happened in around 2008, which isn't really a meme, but was a music video by Amberly Ettinger that circulated during the 2008 U.S. presidential election. And she was called the Obama Girl. And she got like 12.5 million viewers with her video. And that was different because that was, again, Obama, you so cool. There was no humor in it, but it was also not animation. It was a real person. who looked sincerely enraptured by Obama. And if anyone else was either feeling enrapture of Obama or they just wanted a good laugh at somebody who was, that was
all I want to say about that is hello, fellow kids.jpg.
And then you get into like the Obama versus Romney fictitious rap battle of 2012. As of October 20th, 2020, that video has had over 150 million views. And again, not a very caustic election. It's almost just like a sequel. It's just like a better version of This Land Is Your Land, really. It's almost identical. But it really shows you what, under Trump, we would get all of these almost like modern day Nast memes of him saying things or looking stupid. I posted one. Or we had the Pelosi slow hand clap or the ripping of the pages. But it was just, it was okay. It was just what it was. But what makes this different? Okay, well, as soon as that photo was taken, a woman named Ashley Smalls, a man, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but a PhD student at Penn State shared the photo on Twitter, writing, "This could be an email." Her tweet had more than 1.1 million likes and 139,000 retweets as of Saturday morning. Literally,
she basically made a cartoon, a political cartoon, where the caption is Bernie Sanders thinking this could have been an email. Sanders is just sitting there like, why am I here? This sucks, Yeah,
and I wrote one that day too. Not that the day of, I just thought, oh my God, he looked insane. I saw just literally the video of him. I thought he looks like Columbo, and I talked about it with my mom, and I sent her a photograph. Like, can you believe it? Because she didn't even see the Columbo photo. I didn't know it was. I thought it was a brown overcoat. But the following day, on Thursday, I had gotten in the rep, and I wrote Bernie Sanders, a senator from Vermont, and part-time model for the Burlington Coat Factory. And then became the fight. Then became the addiction. So
when you saw that photo, you were immediately struck by it. Can you tell me more about what you thought when you first saw it?
I'll be honest with you. It was a photo for me. I literally was watching the inauguration. I saw him slumped over in what looked like a brown overcoat, and that just blew my mind because he looked so. I'm Jewish, so we have a word in Yiddish called Hamish. He looked like a regular guy I would have seen in Forest Hills when I was visiting my grandparents, What guy at the deli. He looks like an old Jewish man at the deli ahead of you saying, "Hey, wait your turn. How much is this chopped liver? You're really going to charge me that much for some extra relish?" So he's
a fellow New Yorker, right?
He is always him. So
what does Hamish mean?
Just kind of a plane, just of the earth,
okay.
But the point is this. For the first few days, everybody was making caption photos. And they were all caption photos of a man who was cold, a man who was bored, a man who would like to be somewhere else, a man with not good taste in clothing, a man with cat mittens. And all of a sudden, people started to focus on the cat mittens. For a little while, they were focusing on the manila envelope, wondering what the hell has he got to do? After this, he's got to play. I got to mail this. I got to get this out in the mail.
I should have got up earlier. I would have made it to the mailbox
first. But I'm not just going to waste my whole day here. I got places to go. I'm saying literally. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to do this, but everybody, maybe because we're not watching Saturday Night Live, everyone was doing their own shtick. But something really interesting happened, and it happened really quickly. Photoshop, and this is really cool. And I can't tell you what day this happened. I'm guessing it happened as early as the next day or Friday. But people started to Photoshop Bernie into other places. That's when things got completely different. Because the minute we start Photoshopping Bernie into different environments, unlike photojournalism, unlike traditional snarky memes, we lose the context. The original context is gone. It is no longer about Bernie at the election, at the inauguration. It's now this man who you just said, who is how would you describe him?
Hamish.
Again? Hamish. But also, how did you describe him with his hair and his glasses?
Humble. He doesn't put on airs.
there's something very human about him, right? And like what we've talked about
Average.
before, the recognizable humanity, but unlike what you said, unlike Kennedy, unlike Guevara, instead of being an icon of cool, of hip, of leadership, and I mean this with nothing but love, he's like Chaplin. He's the tramp. He's a clown. He is, if not he is either at best an everyman, which is someone we can identify with, or he is less than an everyman. He's a schlub. He's a dumpy guy, which we either will feel is an object of affection or an object of derision. But because all of us know someone, no matter where in the world we live, who's old, someone we know who doesn't take great cares to spend a lot of money on his appearance, someone who just cannot put himself together, someone who is cold, someone who is uncomfortable. There is so many things going on in that photo that all of us on planet Earth, even if we live someplace where it's not cold or not political and you don't even know who Bernie is, there's just something so universal about an old man crossing his legs, crossing his arms, trying to stay warm with glasses, natty balding hair, and like all of us today, wearing a mask.
Well, we've all been cold. And, it does strike you when you look at the inauguration. You see all those high up people, wearing their beautiful clothes. Do they look like they're freezing? No, they don't look like they're freezing. Only Sanders looks like he's freezing.
But now, you look behind us, you can see he's in the Last Supper. He's, sitting on the couch with the cast of Friends. He's sitting over with Voldemort. He's on the cover of an old Genesis album. He's been repurposed into a Pepto-Bismol. He's been repurposed into into all sorts of things. There's a Weekend at Bernie's poster behind your arm, Randall, which shows him flanked in the original poster with actually Kamala and Joe's face in the behind them. But it's so, there are all these websites that will let you make your own Bernie memes, and it's so addictive. And even like famous people, like David Lynch just put one out today of Bernie in Twin Peaks. Terry Gilliam took that famous Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas cartoon and put him in the driver's seat. He directed Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Daniel Radcliffe posted him in a Harry Potter scene. Paul Bettany just took the latest still of him from the latest episode of WandaVision and put him in this scene. Eve Plum, who was in the Brady Bunch, just posted today a photograph of Bernie as part of the Brady Bunch. I mean, even people who are iconically famous in their own right are putting him in images together.
Well, I know
what's going on here, man.
I know people who don't like Bernie Sanders personally. They seem to have like a personal thing where they think he's like kind of, I don't know. He's not, they don't like him. But I think most people, they feel a certain connection to Sanders. They feel a certain affinity with him. I mean, he's like an everyman. He's like a normal person. I mean, that's why it's great putting him in these pictures, because you look at all these pictures that they shot him into. He's in an unusual. They shot him into an unusual situation. He's us. He's a normal, everyday man.
I have
without any pretension, and you put him in these pictures, and it looks funny. It's a great contrast.
Who are Republicans or Warren supporters, which is code for people who hate Bernie. And they love these Bernie photos, I mean, because either they love it because they like Bernie and they subtract the politics from Bernie, or they love it because they think he's a fool. And as I said, a clown can also be an object of derision. And you can laugh either with him or at him in these photos. It's completely up to you. And I think there's a certain kind of beauty in the fact that, it's one of the, unlike the Obama, which is cool, and the Boss Tweed, which is deflammatory, you can look at these Bernie memes, and depending on what you bring as a viewer or even as the maker of the meme, you can decide whether this is a deflammatory work or a celebratory work. Is it satire? Is it observational humor? Is it surrealism? Is it absurdism? That's completely up to each person.
I feel it's very playful. I mean, I I don't think I think Bernie Sanders doesn't have a problem with it. I mean, I don't think I think it's hard to really attack Sanders personally. I mean, it's just I mean, the friends I have that don't like Sanders, I mean, their criticisms of him are pretty weak.
But
I
I'm saying
mean,
you don't have to. That's the point. He's transcended a couple of things. He's transcended politics in this meme. He's even transcended what we know about him. I mean, it's an interesting point because in India right now, there's a farmers' revolt going on, and there are these interesting photoshops of Bernie with the Sikhs who are protesting, the Sikh farmers who are protesting to show solidarity. In that sense, Bernie is now like the Che Guevara poster or the Shepard Farley Hope poster. But in other ones, there's him in Bollywood, just in the background of all these famous Bollywood movies. Now, I don't know anything about Bollywood movies, but apparently I was looking for The Last Supper, which is behind you, and I found there's a Bollywood film called The Last Supper, which must be really popular in India. And if you're from India, please let us know. But they kept on photoshopping him into all of these scenes. So if you don't know the context of contemporary Indian cinema, you're not going to get the joke. I do not know the context. But conversely, I know a lot of people who are laughing at the joke of inserting Bernie into this famous film from India don't know anything about Medicare for all or budget reconciliation. They just know what they see of this image of a universal human being. And I think that's great. I mean, what's so unique about this, what makes this more than just the sarcastic Wonka or the boyfriend looking back at the girl, is that there's an infinite amount of ways Bernie can be juxtaposed against so many things. He can be reimagined in so many ways. You can focus on the particulars of his gloves, his body language, his facial expression, or his composition. And each day, I think another person is like, how am I going to add something new to the mix as an artist? And each day, as someone who appreciates it, they're going, what new surprising version will come out today? I post 30 Bernie memes on my newsfeed every single day, and they just keep on coming. Why do you think that it hasn't died down? It's now 7 days on. Why is it still going?
well, I think you said a lot. I mean, there isn't much negativity associated with it. I mean, Bernie Sanders enjoys it. His enemies probably enjoy it. His friends enjoy it. Everybody enjoys it. I mean, it's just fun. It's just fun. It's just, we live in an era where there's a lot of fun stuff going on. I mean, I know that sounds crazy probably, but I mean, even the people that attack the Capitol, I mean, some of them, it's hard to know if you should take them seriously or not because they're,
Well,
there's a lot of humor involved with this, with the protest.
I don't really want to go to that part, but you raise a good point. And my girlfriend, who's both a stand-up comic and a professor of psychology, raises a point that's kind of where you're headed, which is that, whether it's the last 4 years of Trump or it's living in a pandemic or it is what happened, as you said, with the violence at the Capitol, the insurrection, it's been a really hard and depressing time. And it's been very hard to have a laugh, much less a gentle, non-hard satiric laugh. And this Bernie photo has given us permission, as you say, to be playful, to be creative, to find humor. You and I, we're trapped in our homes right now, but with a simple app, we can send Bernie all over time, space, reality, art. We can move him around. And we can see him in places we'll never be or we've never been to. And it's liberating, It gives you a feeling of control. Again, it lets you, as you say, finally breathe and relax and just enjoy something political without actually finally, for the first time in years, having to feel guilty about it or angry about it or upset about it, right? It distracts. And sometimes I think, originally wanted to do an episode, and we'll do it, about escapist art and escaping into art. And I think right now we have all taken on the role of either artist or art lover. And I think one of the great things about this is there's been a real democratization of art. Because right now with these Bernie memes, anyone can be an artist, right? Any of us can make a Bernie meme.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about the internet. Yes, I mean, it's great.
And anyone can possess it, right? I don't have to, like, okay, yesterday, this woman made a you call it, a doll, a stuffed doll of Bernie sitting on a chair based on that photo.
It was knitted, right?
Knitted. She knitted it. Thank you. So she knitted it, and she auctioned it off for charity on eBay. And yesterday, Tuesday, it made $40,000. $40,000, all of which goes to Meals on Wheels. Similarly, the Bernie Sanders people have a sweatshirt with the photo. Same deal. All goes to Meals on Wheels. The sweatshirt sold out. Topps, the baseball card company, until today, folks, January 28th, for $9.99, will make you a physical baseball card of this photo. We'll send you one of Bernie. Now, I don't know if that goes to charity. It better, because I will say right now, the one thing that the Bernie meme and Che Guevara and the Farley photo all share is inherently they weren't profitable. They went to causes and charities. And I don't want to really get into fair use too much, but it's very hard for Getty Images, which has the right to use which has the rights to the Sanders photo. It's very hard for them to go around, acting out copyright law, at least for the Sanders photo. But we'll do that another day. So, in general, though, what I went back to when we talk about the democratization of art is that anyone can disseminate this art. Anyone can make this art. Money is not a barrier to becoming an artist in this world of Bernie memes. Money is not a barrier to purchasing these Bernie memes. Location, you don't have to go to a museum or a gallery. And you are free to use it to express whatever political opinions you want, whether it's a farmer's revolt in India or you're doing a stand-up comedy show in New York and you just want people to see how funny your show's going to be by making fun of Bernie. And strangely enough, I feel that all of this is in alignment with Bernie's own ethos, right? He's a democratic socialist. So this sense of what we're doing, doesn't it feel like it is in line with the man who wears those handcrafted mittens?
That is a great point, Chris. Yeah, I mean, Bernie is happy about all this. This is, I mean, if this had happened to, say, Donald Trump would be angry because he'd say, I'm not making a dime off of these memes.
And maybe that's the deal with Obama. You always felt that Obama approved of Shepard Fairley's Hope. You always assumed the subversive nature of not making money off the Che Guevara poster until it did. And by the way, quick side note, once it finally did make money and copyright was being used by Fitzpatrick, he donated all of the profits to a hospital in Havana and gave the original artwork to Che Guevara's wife. So much like Meals on Wheels, again, these things aren't really used to make people rich. They're used to raise money for a good cause, which makes none of them subversive because unlike things that make fun of someone like Tweed, as I say, there's an alignment between cause and art, which I guess is kind of the beauty of political art in a way. I don't think I can say any more than that. Randall, do you have anything you want to add?
I guess the only thing I want to say is if we're entering an era where the biggest political icon is Bernie Sanders sitting in a chair wearing homemade mittens, I'm okay with that.
Fair enough. He is, by the way, the first person ever to be, he's the most well-seen U.S. senator in the history of the Republic. And certainly the most popular meme of 2021, if not the most popular meme of the 21st century so far. Good going for a 79-year-old man from Brooklyn. All right. Until then, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Thanks for watching or listening. Bye.
Bye.